How do we reconcile that the culture informed the Israelites' view of cultic worship and even morality, while at the same time acknowledging that God transmitted commandments, ordinances, and God-given morality at Sinai? Was God borrowing morality, cultic worship from other cultures while claiming that it was good and acceptable? Or was it a mere coincidence that God had decreed the Israelites to obey their already established cultural preferences?
Well, I think part of the answer to this is, Paul talks about the law of God being written on a person's heart, whether they had the actual law or not, referring to, pagans as, this is the basis for why they do righteous things and why they are accountable to God, and why they are, their actions can be judged one way or the other as being right or wrong. There's this some people would use the phrase natural law. There are just these sort of God-given orientations within a human being that are just there to give everyone a sense of right and wrong, whether that is codified in a document or not. So I think that's part of what's going on here. God's not like saying, "Hey, I'm out of moral things now. I need to go borrow one from a pagan or from some other culture." God doesn't run out of ideas and have to go borrow some moral principle. That's not the way to look at the cultural similarity. I mean, cultural similarity, even if there no law or no written law exists, again, Paul would say, well, that's because we're created as images of God, and we have this thing called a conscience. We have this sort of built-in sense of right and wrong. So even whether it's written down or not, or various forms of it that might be similar, might have some differences, it's still trying to work out this sense of right and wrong. So that's part of what's in view here. People were who, I think, just again generally speaking, people were who they were when God decided to meet them and use them or enter into a covenant relationship with them. So when it comes time to actually talking about the laws of Israel, God's law, the stipulations of those laws were designed to keep Israel distinct sometimes, and most importantly, that distinction meant not worshiping another god. Okay. At other times, the laws would more or less just teach certain ideas about the unique God of Israel. In other words, the way God viewed creation, the way God viewed, what he had done, or taught the Israelites something about God's character. We talked when we were in Leviticus a lot about the idea of creation order. Again, that teaches us something about the nature of God, and God himself looks, at what he has made. He brings order out of chaos, and so there's an order to creation that certain laws are designed to teach people that idea and maintain a creation order way of conducting your life or looking at relationships. So, some laws are designed to teach us something about the character of God or the way God looks at things, not mixing certain things, whether it's fabrics, again, going back to Leviticus here. Again, teaching the bigger idea of not mixing the holy with the profane, the sacred with the profane. And some laws just exist for that reason and that reason only, to teach us about a principle that is important to God, that is built into the fabric of creation as he made it. And he wants us to understand it, how he looks at it, and live accordingly and think accordingly about how we are part of creation and how that should affect our behavior. Sometimes, things may have seemed more normative to an Israelite, that a particular law and the law of Moses would be like, well, yeah, of course, we would do this or not do that, because again, their own sense of right and wrong innately, or their own, cultural sense of you should do this or not do that. A specific law in the law of Moses would be, right up, right alongside that, very consistent with it, what to do with, I hate to say it, what to do with human excrement. Okay, there are laws about that. Again, that's tied to sacred and profane thinking, in respect to, holy ground and non-holy ground, and, being defiled and so on and so forth. But yet the average person in the ancient world, would just know that, okay, when we should be doing this outside the camp. We don't do it in the house. We don't do it where the kids play. mean, there's just normative things in life that are reflected in Old Testament law, but then since they're in Old Testament law, they're often given a higher meaning or a theological orientation to them to teach some bigger, more abstract principle. And I think you have that with food laws, for instance. Again, some of that would have been normative, but again, given a theological meaning. Other laws were not, normative. They would have been newer. They would have had an immediate, specific context. Don't offer sacrifices to goat demons, anymore. Well, again, that's a specific, situation that Israelites were encountering in the wilderness. We have the whole goat for Azazel thing that's related to that. Again, there's specific context to certain things. Mosaic law isn't just one kind of law, and the laws in it don't arise from one point of origin or one context. It's a very variegated thing, and so it's a little hard to talk, terribly specifically about what this or that thing meant and how it relates to to a culture or what, because there's going to be some variance with that. Depending on what it is, and again, even where it's placed in the law, and what category it falls into. I would say, even after God removed many of these sort of distinctiveness barriers, like in New Testament times, with Peter and the apostles and the Gentiles being brought into the people of God and so on and so forth. Even when some of these barriers are removed, there was no compulsion or no insistence that the Jews go do something that would frankly make them uncomfortable. Well, now that we have the church, now every Jew has to eat pork. Well, there's no law like that. God's not going to care if they eat pork or not. That's what Paul says. Some honor this day over that day. Some eat this and don't eat that. Whatever. The whole point is that you don't judge someone's spiritual status by whatever decision they make on those things. So there's latitude, even when, again, the laws of distinction are sort of dispensed with. That doesn't mean you're compelled now to do something that is really ingrained in your culture. Let's say as a Jewish convert, you're not forced to do that. So I think there's just a lot of things to think about here, and it's not a very neat, subject that you can just sort of put in one drawer and then, okay, I understand it now. There's just a lot more going on, when it comes to law and why we have some laws and what they mean and what people are supposed to think, and were they normative or not? Are they new? Are they old? Are they familiar or unfamiliar? Again, it's just a big it's a big playground, that has lots of stopping points and lots of categories.